Well, we are ready to cut the top off. We've made it this far, and probably a lot of you are wondering, why did we actually glue the whole box together if we're just going to cut the top off? And simply put, the main reason that we did it was it makes sanding a lot easier to do the whole thing at once than to have two separate pieces and try to sand just one little tiny piece, especially when you're trying to make these things sit perfectly flush. In addition to that, as a fine woodworker, what you would like is the grain to be continuous from one side of the box to the other. That's going to give you the most professional look, and that's what we want to achieve. And by making it as one piece and then cutting it, it will allow the grain to match up almost perfectly. And there will be an 1/8 of an inch kerf that gets cut out of it, but other than that, it should match up perfectly from the top to the bottom, and it makes for a very nice pattern as the grain continues all the way around. Since it is originally the same board, it's easy to match up. If I had to do the top and the bottom separately, the chances of getting the wood to match up would be a lot lower. So that's kind of the reason why we do it. Now, when we cut the top off, we don't want to just cut it all the way through the box. So right now the blade is sticking up over the box, and in that case, what would happen is the box would come apart as I'm cutting. So this would be a lot easier just to cut all the way through the box like this, but this would not be as safe. And the reason why is because as we cut through this thing, we could cut through the first side, no problem. Okay, we could cut through that all the way through, no problem. We flip it over, we cut through the other end, no problem, be fine. Then as we cut this one, what would happen is 3 of the sides would be cut already, and it would be very easy for the bottom to hit, the sides to hit, or any of this, because it would just be held together by a single strip here. In addition to that, when we did finally get to the 4th one, it's even worse because now we're holding it, it's got that tiny little thing, it's very easy for the box to be pushed in like this, and so the blade would cut an angle out of the boards that we're trying to cut. So because of that, we have to be a little more careful. Also, as we got through the 4th one, there's a chance that the box could do that, or do this, or as we're holding it, that it could pinch right onto the blade. The box would pinch on the blade, and the box would be violently thrown backwards. Who knows what would happen to our hands in that case? Very likely they could fall down onto the blade, they could be pushed backwards, but regardless of what were to transpire, it's putting our fingers in a lot of unnecessary risk. So we have to make sure that while we're cutting the top off of this box, we have no possibility of any of those dangers. So we're going to employ a very special technique to cut the top off safely. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Now, luckily for us, I have this box that's previously been cut. I can use it as a sample and show you what we're doing. So we don't want the blade to cut all the way through. What we're actually trying to do is get the blade to leave just a paper thin strip of wood. Maybe something like right around there. Now, it's hard to actually find the exact center of this blade. The exact center of it will be the highest point possible. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to find that. So you can hunt around with a rule and see if you can figure out where it is. My experience is, though, that even using your best guess and measuring, I always seem to have the blade be slightly higher than I think it is. And that's probably because it's hard to find that exact center. So in this case, I have to just raise the blade to what I think the box is. It should have been thicknessed to 1/2 of an inch. Now obviously in real life, it's not going to be exactly 1/2 of an inch. It will be a little less or a little more. And depending on your skill level, you'll get it as close as you can to that 1/2 inch. But it may be off, and you know, you might have yours be off as much as a 1/16 depending on how skilled you were at the planing operation. So what I always do is I'm going to find 1/2 of an inch, but I'm going to drop it down a little bit less than that. So I'm going to try to find 1/2 an inch, and as it looks like it came out, it's starting about 1/2 an inch right now. I'm just going to drop the blade just a little bit, and that's about where I think the highest point is. I'm going to drop it maybe about 1/16 of an inch. because I want to make sure that I'm under what I need. I can always cut more, I just can't add dust back to the project and make it whole again. So I'll simply start less than what I think I need. You won't be able to see exactly what I'm doing while I'm cutting, but under the table, this is what's happening. I'm over here at the front of the table saw, and this is the adjustment that I wanted. Now, once I get to the adjustment that I want, I'm gonna back off this wheel a little bit. And I'd like you to think of this wheel as a clock. So we got 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, all the way around, just like the old style clocks. Okay, so what I wanna do is wherever I'm gonna start, I'm gonna back it up about 4 or 5 hours. Okay, I'm gonna I'll just start at 5 o'clock in this case. Okay, I'm gonna make a cut. I wanna check the cut. More than likely it won't go all the way through. That's good, that's what I want. So when it does not go all the way through, I'm gonna raise it up 1 o'clock. I'm gonna go to 6 o'clock, and then to 7 o'clock, and then to 8 o'clock, and then to 9 o'clock. And as I do this, I'm gonna be checking every single time I run it through. And eventually, I'll be able to get a very paper thin sheet of wood that's keeping the top from the bottom. And that's what I'm looking for, is that magical thin piece of wood that will keep my hands safe, that will keep the cut clean, and that's how we're gonna cut the top off. You won't be able to see that from the other angle, but I just wanted you to know what I'm doing when you see me reach down and change the hand wheel. That's what I'm doing. I'm going 1 o'clock at a time. This operation needs to be done with the guard off. Whenever the guard comes off, we're always going to be in heightened alert because it's a much more dangerous situation. We don't have the guard there to protect us. We're going to rely on some of those other steps in the multiple layers of protection that we teach. So I'm going to show you how to do that. The board is going to be passing over the blade like so, meaning that my hands are going to also be passing over the blade. Whenever we have that, we always have a danger situation. I want to show you how to place your hands so that you're not in as much danger of an accident occurring. The first thing I'm going to do is talk about my left hand here. My left hand is going to be passing right over the blade, and so a danger is my hand actually making contact with the blade if something were to go wrong. I've seen enough kickbacks and experienced enough kickbacks to know often what happens is when you're going to cut, you'll start your cut, everything will seem fine, and then bang, all of a sudden the board just disappears. And whichever direction your hands were going, that's where they go. So I don't want my hands to fall down onto the blade. So to prevent that, I'm gonna actually attach my arm to my body so that it cannot go anywhere. That way I can be pushing down and have less chance of my hand dropping down onto the blade. Okay? It's not 100% guaranteed, but it helps. Again, attach my arm to my body. It's pinned there. It's forcing, it's constant pressure against my rib cage to make it hard for that arm to go down onto the blade. Now, it can still pivot up and down, and it could still drop. Okay, so I have to be aware of that. I also want to make sure that while I'm pushing down on this box, I'm pushing this direction towards the fence. Okay, my hand's going to be right almost in line with the fence, and what I want is if something goes wrong, I want this box to kick out like that, my hand to drop onto the blade. So my hand goes here onto the fence. I do not want it to drop onto the blade. So I'll be pushing through. I have it attached to my rib cage, and I'm pushing down, but I'm pushing diagonally over the fence, because if that box disappears, I want my hand to do that. Okay? And I'm trying not to like push so hard down into the table that I'm going down. I'm trying to push a diagonal pressure, and I'd like, if something goes wrong, my hand only drops about that much. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to put that pressure to where my hand would drop this direction. So it's a subtle difference, but you always need to know whenever you're working at a tool, your finger pressure, your hand pressure, and your arm pressure should never be going towards the blade, because if something goes wrong, that's where you're going to end up. So my left hand attached to the rib cage and pushing this direction. So just in case something does go wrong, my hand falls this direction. Again, it's not 100% guarantee. We're trying to add multiple layers of protection in order to keep us safe. Now that we've made our left hand secure, we're going to concentrate on our right hand. And with the right hand, what I want to do is keep it attached to this fence. What I don't want is if this box gets grabbed, that it pulls my hand across the blade and into the table saw. That's a very likely outcome when the board gets grabbed. It's going to go across the blade in whichever direction. So if I was cutting more over here, it would go across this way. If I'm cutting on this side, it's going to go across this way. Right? I need to be aware of that. I should be able to look ahead into the future and see what could go wrong and then try to prevent it. So I'm going to actually anchor my hand to the fence here. Okay, so what I'm doing is I've got my finger attached into the fence so that my hand cannot physically go into the blade. That's what I want. That helps keep me safe. It's part of that multiple layers of protection. And what I'm doing is I'm pinching the box backwards towards the fence to hold it into place. I do not want this box coming away from the fence. That's what gives me the protection. So I'm squeezing it and pinching it back that direction. So as I slide across the fence here, I'm just sliding down the fence, and if something were to go wrong, that's what I'd like to see. My hand's locked in place, and the box gets thrown out of my grip and goes off wherever it's gonna go. As long as my hand's safe, that's the thing I worry about the most. So I wanna do that. Again, I'm gonna slide my finger along this fence where it could catch. If you don't have this kind of fence, you can always move your hand to the other side of the fence too. The other types of fences are narrower and you could do it that way. But for this one, I'm just gonna slide my finger along here. I just want you to see what I'm doing. And then the last little bit is sometimes you'll notice a rock in your box. Mine, a little bit of rock on this one, a little bit on this one, none on this one. So when you go through and your box has a little bit of rock to it, that's usually because when you sanded it, it got a little bit out of perfect, or the boards could just warp a little on their own. But regardless, if you get a little bit of that wobble, you have to pick one way or the other. I always lean it back. That's just the habit I get into. Now, you could usually hear a slightly different sound just as you're about to poke through. In this case, I'm checking with my ruler just to see, and I have a paper thin piece of wood that's left. So once my first side is to the right height of the blade, now I can just go around and cut all the rest of the sides. I don't have to do any more adjustment. If you were off and you accidentally cut it too much, back your wheel off a couple of o'clocks. And, you know, if you're at 12 o'clock, go 11, 10, 9, and then start the same thing on the other side and do it again. Since I was able to hit it on the first one, and usually you'll be able to, I just leave that setting, and now I'm going to cut the rest of the sides. So I successfully cut through the box. It will leave these little paper thin strips. Just go ahead and break those towards the outside of the box. If you break them towards the inside, sometimes it'll cause a little chip out. So nothing big, just break those. If there's any little turds left, just break those things off, and you've now got your box.